Hello.
Hello.
So welcome everyone to our third episode of Taking Back Birth. So I've been honored to be on this platform, Children's Health Defence Canada, to have these very important conversations about all things birth to remove fear, normalize our sacred gift that we've been given as women, and just to have conversations that I feel have not been happening for a long time, at least not in mainstream worlds. Maybe, if people are aware or in their own niche, but I'm happy to have this, platform to talk about these things. And I'm very excited to have Corrine Brown out. I think I already mixed that up. I think I had it back in my head how I wanted to say it the first time, didn't I?
That's okay. Corinne.
Yes. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Corrine Brown of Brown Roots Love. So we were connected the past, I think like at least a couple of years ago, but really connected just recently, the last several months again. And it was amazing because she mailed me her book, and then we're going to get into all the things about this. So The Badass Birth Goddess, and it's Empower Yourself, Avoid the Labor Funnel, and Make Your Dream Birth a Fabulous Reality. So I'm really excited to kind of touch base in here, but I'll just kind of give it over to yourself and give a little background, bio, and an intro.
Sure. Yeah. So my name again is Corrine Brown. And I think I'll start my background just kind of when I graduated as a naturopathic doctor in 2010. So I was focusing in women's health and prenatal obstetrics, and started working inside a midwifery clinic. And in 2014, I actually decided to close my clinic and take my business online. And in 2015, I created an online program called Love Your Labor, which I started selling, and that has really become my flagship program. It's like the backbone of my business. And we've had thousands of women go through the program and have these beautiful, positive, empowering birth experiences. And in 2021, I self-published that book that Kristen was just talking about, The Badass Birth Goddess. And yeah, this is it, like online business, connecting with like minds, and supporting and empowering women.
Mm-hmm. And I just love your Instagram presence too. I just find you're just you just have such a great like personality, and just like your reels and just how you get information out there. It's like really personable and easy to digest.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. So make sure you are following Corinne on Instagram at Brown Roots Love, right? I'm like always typing
It's,
and it comes
yeah,
up.
it's brownroots.love is the handle. Yeah.
Yes. And if
There's
I was more prepared,
that's okay.
I'll get there. I'm working the behind the scenes right now, so I gotta figure this out.
Wait,
so,
my
yes.
URL just popped up.
So one of the things when I was reading your book that intrigued me, because working with Billy Harrigan, she, says that the last thing to go is birth, right? Like we learn about food, immunizations, like, products, like all the chemicals, all the things. And then the last thing to unlearn is birth. But you have been kind of connected intuitively, or just really passionate about birth, like you said, like since a child. Like you've always been interested in birth. Like what do you think that is, or why?
Isn't that so funny? Like looking back, all of my core memories do involve like a belly or a baby or a pregnancy or a birth. Maybe not all the core memories, but a substantial amount more so than other people. And I mean, why? I think it's like my spiritual belief is that like, this is why I'm here. And it was just like this constant reminder that this is your passion, this is your calling, this is your, your thing. And there's one story actually that I didn't tell in the book that actually goes counter to what you're talking about. When I was in university, I had a girlfriend who had a baby, and she was super natural, super holistic, and had her baby naturally. And I, somewhere between the jigs and the reels, became indoctrinated. And I was like, whoa, you had a natural birth. Like, how did you do that? Or like, why did you do that? Or something. Like I said that in a group of women. And I don't remember her exact response, but she was just like, put me in my place, like totally. And it was like a smack in the face. It was like, oh yeah, natural birth. Like, of course, it was almost like I was veering off path. And she like brought me back and gave me this like really firm reminder that like, no, this is what we are literally designed to do. It's super empowering. I'm really proud of myself. Like she reframed it for me. And I was just like, oh yeah, damn. And then from there went into naturopathic medicine, went into doula work, went into naturopathic obstetrics. And yeah, so I really believe that we are indoctrinated as we grow up, right? So I somewhere lost my way of this calling, but then I found it again, luckily.
It's amazing how there's things like put on our path that do stop us in our tracks to veer us back to where we're supposed to be. Like I always think, even for myself, like I wanted to go into environmental sciences. Like I was very, nature, outdoors, and just wanted to be working, in, with my hands in the earth, like doing all those things. And then, but I was told maybe there's not enough jobs, you'll make no money, like it's just not a good career option. Go into nursing, there's work, it's good money, you can travel, you can help people. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds all right, sure, let's do that. But same thing, like like that just totally is the opposite from working with like nature and being outdoors but it's amazing how things happen in your life to get you back on track. And I find that fascinating that the propaganda and the indoctrination is that manipulative, that even for yourself, as someone who is passionate about birth, like throughout your whole life growing up, like as a child, still had that moment where it was getting to you.
Yes, I know. And it's wild. Like I think I was 9 years old. I was a doula for my cat. Like I saw the
I was going to bring up that story. Yeah.
I saw the entire natural birth process in the most natural and instinctive way. And like the fact that could be somehow taken from me, or that I could somehow forget that, just how beautiful and natural and normal it was. And it's true. It's potent stuff, that propaganda. It's the fear, right? We've seen that.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you sharing that story, because I think it's important to show like how brainwashing it is.
Yeah.
And you have to have, your convictions really in place, or be surrounded by people that can remind you to get back on track. Because otherwise, it's hard. I mean, they've been working at the propaganda for a long time, so they know how to work us. Yeah. But it was amazing. I love that story. At 9 years old, you got to like witness your cat giving birth. And I think it's important to, people that are around animals, whether it's farms or they're, pets at home, and they get to witness this. And I think one of the parts in when you share that story was that your cat found a very quiet place to go and be alone.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was hiding in the dark, warm furnace room in her box, away from everybody. And I was like, knock, can I come in? She was like, okay. She let me in, and she didn't it didn't disrupt her process, right? But if the whole family had piled in and turned on the lights and started like poking and prodding her, she would have been the heck out of there, right? Mm-hmm. Because instinctually they know they need privacy in order for it all to happen. And we do too. And that's kind of the point, right? Is we need to emulate what nature is doing.
Yes. And I think like comparing that is very important, because how, animals, they know to go be alone, and whether, a quiet, dark, calming atmosphere. Why do we think that we need to go into like the complete opposite, where it is the most like sterile environment, bright light shining, all the people around, and think
disturbed
that is
constantly.
Like, disturbed constantly, with people in and out, knocking on the doors, this, that, beeps, like everything. And how we think that could ever be conducive to like a normal labor.
Exactly. It's as though, sometimes I feel it's as though the mainstream medical community has either forgotten or never learned what physiological birth requires and needs in order to unfold. Yeah. Like, right. Like they all they learned was, these are the pharmaceuticals to use in these particular situations. And, those can all be avoided if we just
symptoms. How do we treat the symptoms? What is, it's all like the prescription protocol. And totally. I think you had very interesting experiences. And I think we talked about this before, that I think, or it was in your book, I believe, that your births were exactly what you needed, probably to kind of continue to guide you on this path that you're on to help women. But I thought maybe we could kind of share your own birth experiences, because I think they're really important with, where you started, what you wanted, and what happened, and then, where you ended up with your last babe.
Yeah, totally. I actually adore my birth journey now. Like, I love getting to tell this story because it's so meaningful, and it's very helpful for my clients as well when they can see that I haven't just had 3 super easy, fast, natural, no problem births, that I've actually gone in and had to advocate and grapple with these things as well. So my first birth was a planned home birth. I was a brand new naturopathic doctor, labor doula, working with the midwives. I was like, yes, this is going to be perfect, amazing. At 39 weeks, my water broke and there was meconium in the fluid. And the midwife is like, okay, let's check you, what's going on. And found that the baby was not head down. So we weren't sure what was going on and had to be stretchered out of my house, taken to the hospital by ambulance, super traumatic, of course. Get to the hospital, find out that he's frank breech, which is the best possible breech position for him to be in for a vaginal delivery. So we attempted a vaginal delivery, which, let me sidebar, it's extremely rare to find an OB who would offer that. And so I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. I was like bawling. I was like, I love you. Like, and it was a very old man. He was about to retire. He's like, I've done this before. Let's give it a shot. So, however, his shift ended 12 hours later and my cervix just wasn't changing. And the next OB was like, yeah, we're doing a C-section now. So bawled through the whole entire thing and had 8 weeks of very difficult postpartum breastfeeding struggles. We did end up breastfeeding, but it was a very, very difficult postpartum. And I do attribute that, of course, to the major abdominal surgery and the difficulty with the hormones unfolding to give me that, that jump off into motherhood. So that was my first birth. And I started to see, like, there were ways I could have advocated better for myself. There were ways I could have prepared myself better. I should have known more. I felt really a lot of guilt, a lot of regret. And I never want any woman to have to experience that, like that crushing guilt when you look at your new baby, like, I didn't do absolutely everything I could to make your entrance into the world the best it could be. So,
but baby's healthy. Baby, exactly. But healthy baby, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But devastated, crushed mother.
Yeah, but who cares? Because you have a healthy baby. Anyway, sorry.
So then I started to, in that, like, between babies, I started to run protocols in my clinical practice where I was helping women prepare for their labors. I was helping their partners become their doulas. I was helping them understand a little bit about breastfeeding before the baby came, and I was helping them to induce their labors. So once I, in 2014, ended up closing my clinical practice, I was like, oh, I should just take those protocols and move them into an online program, and I can sell them to anybody, anywhere. So that's what I did while pregnant with my second baby, was create the Love Your Labor program. And then that was while I was preparing for my own VBAC, so vaginal birth after cesarean, which most of the audience probably knows. But I decided this time, my husband and I decided at this time, that we were going to have a hospital birth because it had just been a little rocky the last time, and that transfer to the hospital was super traumatic for everybody involved. So I was like, let's just have a hospital birth, but I don't want anybody, like no OBs, no nurses, me, you, and the midwife. And that's what it was. And we had this, I think it was, gosh, how many hours was that? 12, I want to say. I'm forgetting all of a sudden, but shorter than the first was 24 hours. This one was, I think, around 12. Having a hard time remembering. There was like some prodromal labor. It was kind of long and annoying. One false labor, it was like annoying. But then we successfully had that VBAC, and all natural, minimal intervention. I felt really happy, but also just like, okay, that was good, but not what I was originally envisioning. And so if I get pregnant again, next time, definitely home birth. Like, we've had the successful VBAC, next time for sure home birth. So then fast forward 3 more years to us getting pregnant with our third, and it was like home birth or bust. Like, this is my last baby. It's now or never. And I was met with some resistance very late in my pregnancy from one of my midwives, and ended up having to really strongly advocate and fire her from my birth, which I know not every woman is probably super comfortable doing, but where everything was on the line for me. And I was afraid that she could pull the plug on my birth at any time just because she was afraid. I was like, yeah, no. So I was like, if you're on call when I go into labor, I'm going to need you to call a backup because I don't want you at my birth. And she was actually thrilled with that. So we had our home birth, which was like, you're going to see, Kristen, home birth is a totally different experience. And I believe that there's a number of different reasons for that. But one big reason is that you're not constantly in your head, where am I in labor? When do we leave? What's going on? How long do we have? How far is the hospital? How much time does that take? We're not constantly trying to get in under the wire to make it to the hospital to deliver the baby. We're just able to fully let go. And the whole thing is just like brrr, domino effect. Because you're comfortable at home, you're not worried about when you're going to leave. Your hormones are totally able to unfold in the way that they're designed to. And we had a 3-hour ecstatic home birth. Like, I still get goosebumps when I think about it. It was the most magical experience of my life, and I wouldn't change anything about it, and I wouldn't trade anything for it. Like, I'm in love with that birth. And like I said, I think it's helpful for people to know that I've had a C-section, I've had a VBAC, I've had a home birth, I've seen the whole breadth of experiences, I've felt the regret, I've felt the ecstasy, So it's like, trust me, trust me, I know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you lived through all the experiences. And I think that with going through that, it made you even more aware of the labor funnel, as you call it,
Yes.
and how hard it is to continue to advocate for yourself once you're in someone else's domain.
Totally.
And so I think about, and I'm sure you kind of reflect as I've reflected on my past 2 births too, that were, before I was aware. 39 weeks with your babe, and then and you said it was okay to talk about, because now this was like
Yep.
me with my first 39 weeks, but that was after a stretch and sweep, which I believe you also had for this first one, right? Yes. And so it makes me wonder, because now when I look back and reflect about my water kind of trickled, wasn't a full break, but water trickled, and ended up having to be induced because I did all the testing. I was GBS positive. If my water broke, I was to go right to the hospital. Wasn't starting natural labor, so I had to be induced. The induction was terrible. Had to go and get an epidural, which I think my mindset was planning for that anyways, unfortunately, but that's where I was at.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to think about, like, what would have happened without the stretch and sweep, like the natural induction, because I don't think we see that as an induction, but it is. And like, what would have happened with our bodies? I always look back now and wonder that with my first, like, what would have, how long would he have gone for? When would he have been ready? What would that have looked like? And how would that whole experience been different? And I don't think it's to look back now. I used to look back, like you said, with regret, and I felt robbed of my experience once I learned, but now it's just to learn from it and hopefully educate others and move on. So I don't know if you've reflected like that far about it, or.
Yeah, I'm happy that you asked this question, because stretch and sweep. So for me, for my first, a stretch and sweep wouldn't have made a difference the way he was positioned, right? So for me, it was a different situation for me, in what actually caused the labor to start and whatnot. But I had stretch and sweeps for my other labors as well, and this is something that I actually offer or suggest as an alternative in the Love Your Labor program, because I always say that I'm like a Libra, right? So I'm like middle of the road. I like a compromise. And so I have previously been like all about stretch and sweeps because it's non-medical, it's natural-ish, and it's a good way to kind of nudge your body to create those prostaglandins to get things moving in the area. But then since talking to you about it, I'm like, yeah, I mean, the more I learn the more I grow, the more I think, the more I become even more bullish about medical freedom and body autonomy, the more I'm like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing any of this? Why are we trying to fit any of it into a particular timeline? Why do we put any like weight on due dates and shit? Like, why are we doing that? It's like, why are we trying to fit into this timeline that is completely man-made? Why don't we just let the body do its thing? And I've become, like, in my own personal beliefs, so far removed from it. And so I think in the next round of Love Your Labor updates, I'm just going to speak to that and to mention that because, you know, like you guys have said, I mean, it's a medical intervention. It's not a pharmaceutical, but it's not something you can do yourself. It's not something that's, you know, supernatural because it can, you know, risk the rupturing the membranes and it can induce labor before your body's actually ready to fall into a smooth and efficient birth. And that's what I love about my program is that it aligns everything, it preps everything, it builds this momentum in behind so that when your body and your baby are aligned and the timing is right, then everything unfolds easily because you've done this work beforehand. But if you're forcing your body into labor before that momentum is built, then you're still in for a long, difficult labor as if you were to get Pitocin, right? And you probably will get Pitocin if you get a stretch and sweep at the wrong time. So I'm definitely going to reflect on that and include that in the program as like, you know, just some counter thought, because that's what this is. It's just about expanding the consciousness and expanding the beliefs and the knowledge around it.
Which I think is like so important to constantly be learning and, you know, growing and where we're at. Because even with, I remember my second, I was like, absolutely, there's no way I'm getting a stretch and sweep done. It was incredibly painful. It was a terrible experience. I didn't know anything about it going in when they said, oh, we're going to do this. And I was like, oh, sure. Like super naive. And it was just awful. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. But then, you know, getting back, I think it's important to talk about this timeline because why are we trying to fit into someone else's timeline of like, okay, well, you're this many weeks, like, you know, we have to hurry things up. And what, like, where did this come from that we like find this acceptable, that we accept being on someone else's watch? And for my second, I was like, I'm absolutely not doing that. But then all of a sudden they started threatening booking an induction date. And I was like, oh, well, that's worse. Because I don't want to be induced again with Pitocin. So, okay, fine. To avoid that, okay, let's start doing all the things. Let's do stretch and sweep, sure, which I swear I was never going to do again. Then I saw my chiropractor and this time put on the electrodes and, you know, like see if you can get things started. And then, and acupuncture. And then that's been, you know, my journey to reflect on that of like, even all those natural are still inductions and are still trying to move baby along on someone else's timeline that's not their own. And if we do this all the time in society for everything, it's like, okay, your birth has to fit within, you know, this time period. Okay, your kids at school have to fit or milestones, or even, you know, babies, like are they hitting these milestones growing up? Like, it's just amazing when I think back and look at society has put us in such an enslaved entrapment in every aspect of our lives. Like,
it's so true. I know when you pan out and look at it, it's like, ooh,
yeah, we're always living up to someone else's schedule in every aspect.
An expectation. Yeah.
And we do this with birth, and we've just accepted it as normal.
Yeah. It takes so much unlearning. Like, I feel like I'm still unlearning. I've been doing this for a decade, you know, and I really think I believe that that's because it's subconscious within us, right? We've been programmed since we were little girls subconsciously to fear this process through TV, media, all the scary, terrifying, traumatic experiences that we've seen of women giving birth. We've all seen it. For a presentation I did once, I like downloaded as many birth clips as I could, and I put them like back to back to back, and it was impactful. It was like, yeah, of course we're terrified. Of course we're like, yes, rush me to the hospital and give me the drugs. Of course we think it's a medical process. Of course we think it's scary and risky because that's all we've ever seen. We've never seen an empowered, ecstatic, autonomous, upright home birth. We've never seen a water birth. We've never seen a woman have an orgasm while she births her. It's not a thing. You have to physically go outside the mainstream matrix and learn that. Right. And so you have to really realize that there's two distinct camps. There's two distinct schools of birth thought, right? There's the birth matrix that believes all that stuff that we just said, all that subconscious programming. And then there's, maybe more than two camps, but there's like a definite, much more physiologic birth camp. And even within there's a spectrum, of course, like free birth to birth center, even natural birth in hospital. And that's where I would say the majority of my clients are at. They're like, well, I'm not ready to free birth in the woods. So what do I do? And it's like, again, that's where I'm kind of middle of the road. That's where I'm like, okay, I understand this is where you want to deliver. Now let's protect you. Let's educate you and empower you and equip you so you can advocate and protect your birth. Because like I was saying in our podcast, your body knows what to do. It's all going to unfold. You just need to protect it so that nothing comes in and disturbs or disrupts that.
Just like when we're talking about your cat, because it's the same thing. When we are in a fight or flight, our bodies know that it's not a safe place to birth. So it'll stop or pause the process. So it gives you a chance to run away. Yes. And it's interesting thinking, of your first experience, meconium, because then all of a sudden midwives would have wanted to check to see what was going on. And because we've also learned to fear that, which we don't have to, it's just, okay, their bum works. Sometimes it can be a sign of stress. But for most times it's, it's just, okay, their bum is working and let's carry on. There's an interesting story about even where I'm sidetracking, but where that even came from was when midwives were becoming regulated and legalized back in Ontario in the 90s. They were like, okay, I guess we need some policies. And they're like the group of women that were trying to legalize or regulate midwives and bring it back into kind of mainstream. We're sitting around having tea, I guess, and this story's been passed down to me. And they're like, okay, we need some policies. So anybody experience a bad birth or anything that we should be aware of, anything that we should write some policies and procedures for. And someone said, well, there was this birth out in in the country, Mennonite area, and there was meconium, and I think something happened. I think it was, I think I could be getting this wrong. Baby passed. I'm not sure, but it was a bunch of other complications that had nothing to do with that. They're like, okay, so anytime there's meconium, that has to be rushed to the hospital. And then, even being in the NICU, as anytime there was meconium, it was like they would call the NICU team to be in the room at the birth. And it was like, okay, baby comes out, immediately intubate, suction out. And every baby that was
traumatic.
Super traumatic. We intubated every baby. It was like this one kind of, intubation. RT was there, did a deep suction, make sure baby was going to aspirate meconium, make sure everything was okay, and then gave baby back to mom. We have since in the last, before I was terminated and let go, but the last I think 5 years kind of stopped doing that. If baby comes out crying after meconium, it just goes with mom. But we used to intubate every baby for deep suction. But anyways, seeing even the difference of not intervening anymore, without intubating and suctioning and just being like, hey, is baby crying? Okay, great. Give it to mom. We can leave the room. But it's just even that, you don't need to go to the hospital for meconium unless there's something else. Even, breech. As we've discussed with others, it's because midwives are losing their skills.
Yeah.
And
so sad.
And because that should been you should have had your home birth experience. But I think, we've said, I think all these things that happen to us are to further propel us on the path that we're on.
Yeah.
And convict us. And sorry,
yes.
I was just thinking these things don't have to happen, but now that we've experienced them, we can help teach.
Totally. Alchemize it. Yeah.
Yes.
Use it to continue the message. I fully believe that. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. And I just realized so I am 38 weeks pregnant now and my brain is just not so sharp. I think this was starting to happen to me in my last podcast last week. And so I'm forgetting words and just kind of train of thought is just good.
You're doing great. You're doing great. Oh my God.
I was like, there was another point I was going with that and now it's totally gone, but it'll come back.
That's okay. It was an important discussion. I loved it.
Yeah, just because I think it's, important to know of going back to even, I was trying to make notes too, so I remember of like making sure your space is protected. So interviewing who you're going to have. Are you going to have a traditional birth companion? Are you going to have, a doula? Are you going to have a midwife? Who are you going to use? Do they align with your values? And I love that you were convicted enough and assertive enough that you were like, this person does not align with me and they need to go. And
right. But I don't know if I would have been with my first birth.
Yes.
Right? You talk about as we get more and more convicted, we've had these experiences where people have fear-mongered us. It's like by the third go around, I was like, get the heck out of here with that. Like, I'm not, like she even said, like your baby could die. And I was like, number one manipulation tool that any like provider would use, get out of here with that. You're not going to bring that into my birth.
And was that because you had like your first was because she didn't even care that you had like a VBAC in between?
Right. Yeah. She's like, I don't think you should have a VBAC at home. And I was like, but it's my second VBAC. And she's like, no, it doesn't matter. And I later learned that she had had a traumatic experience attending a VBAC home birth. But so I was like, I empathize with where you're at. However, don't bring that into another woman's birth space. You got to process that. You got to deal with that on your own. That's not my situation, right? Like you would think a midwife would know better than to fearmonger about somebody else's birth experience. We all get that from, ladies in the grocery line or family and friends and whatnot. But like from your midwife, I was like, come on, that's terrible.
And I love that it worked out for both of you because I like that she was like thrilled that she.
Yeah, she's like, oh, perfect. Okay.
Yes.
Like it was like, whoo.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about the Love Your Labor program. So what is it? What does it entail? You've been doing this for several years now. What does it look like?
Yeah. So it's all online. And it's actually grown and changed and evolved a lot over the years. And it's become quite robust and is about to go through another round of updates as well. So it's actually 6 modules. So the first 4 that I told you about with the labor prep, the partner prep, the breastfeeding prep, and then the birth prep with proper ways to push and, natural labor induction things, which I know we were just talking about. But those are the things I used to do back in my clinic days. And everything is there. It's organized into protocols. And I love it because people can customize it. They can say, I don't really feel like I want to do that, or I want to do more of that. And it's totally up to them. We talk about it in our Facebook group, which I'll get to in a second. But the 5th module is overcoming birth obstacles, because a core foundational principle of the program is the labor funnel, which you've mentioned, right? This is that domino effect of medical interventions. I lay it all out very clearly for my clients, but that's not all there is. There's actually 10 obstacles. Actually, I've added an 11th that I talk about in the program that trip women into the funnel. So it's like, it's not just the funnel you have to be aware of. There's also all these obstacles, and they're predictable and they're premeditated, and you can totally see them all coming. And so just learn about them, learn how to prevent them, learn how to advocate. What are the alternatives? So that's module 5. And then module 6, because I am so into energy and manifestation and attraction and vibration. So module 6 is manifest your best birth. So that is all about all the things that I did for my 3rd birth to manifest that really quick, easy, beautiful, ecstatic home birth experience. So those are the core modules. There's protocols, there's bonuses, but that's the core of it. And then we have a Facebook group where we have thousands of women in there. There's literally so many quality women in there. It's like doulas, labor and delivery nurses. We've got even midwives. 1 OB is in the group, which is amazing. And then tons of just really amazing badass moms as well. And we have a Q&A every week as well. So there's the online component, which is all self-study, and then we get together weekly. And the new version of the program has one-on-one coaching calls that we can incorporate in and stuff. So it's it's becoming really, really robust, and lifetime access too. So people want to use it for their second, third, fourth babies, which people do. And you always get access to the most updated version. So it just keeps getting better.
That's awesome. So how is the OB in the group? Receptive, like learning, like
Oh,
we're
yeah. So I was actually doing a webinar. This was years ago, probably 3 years ago now. I was doing a webinar and I had no idea that this OB was on the call. And I'm teaching about the labor funnel. And I'm going through every single step and what it means and what happens then. And at the very end, she comments in the chat and she's like, Corinne, I'm an OB and I've put so many women through this labor funnel. And she's like, but in my defense, that's all I've got. Like at the hospital, those are the only tools I have at my disposal to support these women through their labors. But she said in her career, she has seen a handful of natural birth experiences. And of that handful, she was blown away by the outcomes in terms of like breastfeeding success, postpartum healing, bonding with baby, like memory and recollection of the birth experience. All of these outcomes were dramatically improved in the natural birth compared to the labor funnel group that she usually saw. And she herself was pregnant. And that's why she saw my Facebook ad. She signed up. She's like, I don't want to go through that labor funnel. So she ended up joining the program and was like, yeah, she was involved like when she was pregnant and really receptive and really like engaged. And then, I haven't seen her much in there, but yeah, that's the thing with the group is that you kind of pop in and pop out when you're pregnant, when you need it. But she's very open, very receptive, and very scared herself of what she had seen the labor funnel do, which I think speaks volumes.
Yeah, absolutely. That she was in there looking for a different experience. So that's massive. I was thinking that even with the labor and delivery nurses that you have in your program.
Yeah, I know.
How they must be, or hopefully they take something back. Or I just find like once you become aware, it is so hard to work in that space. So I'd be curious if they're still in there or what they're doing or where they're at, because it just kills your soul.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I remember where I was going with that rant before. It was the labor funnel. So it was like, okay, so all of a sudden meconium happens. Then there's, midwife fear. So then that gives you fear. So then, your body changes. Then you said, okay, then found out breech. Okay, so a little bit more fear, slows things down. Then traumatic hospital transfer, which was not in your plan. So body would have been like shutting down in that fight or flight response. And, then in the hospital, in an environment you don't want to be in against, your wishes. And then even though you had this amazing doctor who was, willing and wanting to help, have a natural vaginal birth, your body was already too much in that fight or flight from that fear that was put on you from the transfer to them being there. And we know that the cervix actually can like regress, like close back up again to protect that space if you do have to run. And it's amazing. Like that is just like one of the things right there that, the entering into the labor funnel, like perfectly on their schedule because of all those things put in place. How would your body then all of a sudden be able to relax
totally
to do things,
Oh my God. When you put it that way, like when you put it all side by side together like that, you're so right. Like, of course, I didn't see the chance.
No.
Like, it's hilarious. And like how you're saying the cervix regresses. I was 5 centimeters, 5 centimeters, 5 centimeters, which like we could have a whole entire other discussion about cervical checks and how subjective it is and how it's not diagnostic of really anything. It can change in a friggin' second. Mm-hmm. But I was 5 centimeters and then I went to 4 centimeters. And at that moment, I remember just being like, well, for God's sakes, like just completely giving up, like, what am I even doing here? I'm working so hard and I'm going backwards. And so that, I see it. I see what you're saying from that perspective, it's like, my body was just absolutely no.
No. And then in that mindset, like you said, when these checks happen and then you hear, no progression, and then they label it things like failure to progress because our bodies can fail, and all these other terms that they put on us. It's like, great. So you do give up and you're out of that space, and then your body's like, okay, well, yeah, I guess we're done.
Yeah.
And what, yeah, there's no turning back. Then you enter into their complete domain of interventions. And like you said, just now, like, didn't stand a chance. And that's what happens to so many women not realizing it. And also, not only are we on a schedule for gestation, but we're on a schedule with, like, how quickly, you're dilating, or how fast your labor is progressing, or what's happening. Like,
1 centimeter an hour. It's like,
yeah,
come on.
yeah, that is
It's very
like
specific.
such BS. Like, this man who, how to do, like, put his fingers up, how many women to check that and mark it on some linear scale. Like, that's how it works. Because you can go from, 1 to like 10 within that same hour. You can go back and forth. You can, and it's crazy to think of birth as a linear process, and it is absolutely not.
That's it. We have to change our expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And also, just when you do get swept up in the labor funnel, it's this sense of like, they're finally like, oh, good, she just gave up. Like, oh, good, she agreed. And then you're just swept along in the exact same, very unfeeling, unempathetic kind of a system that they just put everybody through. You're like on a conveyor belt. I remember when they were doing my C-section, the doctor and the nurses were talking about something personal between them. They weren't even addressing me. They had their hands in my abdomen and not even treating me like a human. It was the worst. But again, like, even with C-sections, like, that's a part of the Love Your Labor program. It's like, if you must have a cesarean, and we talk about what those cases look like, if you must, here's some ways to advocate for yourself. Here's the ways to make it as gentle as possible and as positive as possible. Like, C-sections sometimes need to happen, but it's like, it doesn't need to be like mine was, it doesn't need to be traumatic. It doesn't need to feel like you're just a body and they're just cutting you open to pull out a baby. Like, it's not personal. So yeah.
No, I know, being in those OR rooms, it's totally different. There's like mom on table, blue, tarp blanket
as if she
up.
can't hear you or see anything.
Yeah, like screen. So it's just like they can't see mom's face. There's that tarp there between separation, and they're just hands in there, and it's a totally different. Just talking about vacation or what'd you do this weekend, or just totally just very nonchalant going on. And it's like, okay, yep, okay, here's baby, get the baby over the side,
poke the head over.
Yeah. And then off baby goes to, well, for us it was to NICU team,
to NICU.
And then dried off, wrapped up, and then possibly given to dad to bring over to mom once all that was done. But it is crazy. And I don't know, just looking back, I just like 12 years, I'm just like, wow, of seeing all that. But I was wondering if we can get into some of the, like, what actually is the labor funnel and some of the obstacles. So I don't know if you want to lay out, like you mentioned, there's 11 obstacles. I don't know if you want to kind of, I know it's in your program and books. I don't know if you're okay with like going through those.
Yeah, I can read them out. I'll just pull it up.
Okay.
But the labor funnel is basically that domino effect. And this is not like something that I created. I mean, I coined the term, but the labor funnel itself, I first learned about from Ricky Lake in The Business of Being Born. Like, that documentary blew my mind wide open. And I couldn't believe that it's all become so incredibly monetized and so just so medical, not at all natural. So the labor funnel, I usually say, starts with some of these tripping points into the funnel, like premature rupture of membranes, the baby's overdue, long early labor, slow dilation, things like that. So those are usually the reasons that you would get the Pitocin in the first place. And then the Pitocin, they'll sometimes call it oxytocin, which is a trick. And I'm like, no, please remember, it's the synthetic form. It's not your own body's endogenous hormone. So because it's the synthetic pharmaceutical, it's way stronger and more potent than our natural hormones. So the contractions are longer, stronger, harder, more difficult, closer together than they would be otherwise. And so that causes women to very quickly ask for the epidural for pain relief, which slows those contractions down. So now they're further apart and slower and weaker, and that's not what they want, right? They want to move this along. So then now mom's got the epidural, so they ramp that Pitocin back up. So she can't feel it, but the baby's still being exposed to these really long, really difficult contractions without much of a break. And that puts baby into distress, right? Because that's not the way Mother Nature intended it to be for the majority of labor. So then baby goes into distress. We've, dropping heart rates and things. And then everybody's panicking, flying around the labor and delivery room. We got to get this baby out right away. Then vacuum forceps episiotomy, or like in some people's cases, full on C-section or an emergency C-section where you're completely sedated. So that's the funnel. That's kind of like the high level overview that I can describe in 2 minutes, but it's obviously much more nuanced than that. And there's some pretty big obstacles that I see, because when I was doing the webinar, I would sometimes have 200 women a week on the webinar, and we would all hang out afterwards for a Q&A, which really kind of over the years turned into like a birth story kind of, people would tell me their birth stories. So I've, at the end of all this, heard thousands probably of birth stories, good and bad, and started to see a lot of the same things cropping up. That's the benefit of having an online business and having exposure to so many women, is that you do hear birth stories in volume. And so the 10 things that, is this 10 or 11? 1, 2, I think this is 11 now, that I see that are really commonly tripping people up, and they're totally preventable and predictable, are things like gestational diabetes, baby malpositioning, going overdue, big baby, dropping heart rate, like we were just saying, small pelvis. That one really bothers me.
Yes.
Placenta previa, fear mongering, just in general, and guilt tripping, mom guilting. COVID protocols are another one. And then VBAC is another big obstacle that I'm going to include an entire VBAC protocol in the program. I'm working on that now, but that's a big obstacle, because they'll look for any excuse to get a VBAC mom into the funnel, right? So we have to really understand that obstacle and be able to advocate and navigate around it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the important things too that you said in your book or through discussions is doing the work. And I think that's why it's so important to why you have the Love Your Labor program, and have these, groups for women to come and discuss, because which I did with my first two, went into it blindly, because I'm like, well, like I've seen hospital births, I know what it all is, I don't need to look into anything. So there's like no work done. Mm-hmm. But you have to be able to do the work, and you have to learn what, about the labor funnels, what to avoid, what these obstacles are, and what you want. And by learning what you want, you have to be able to know like what that looks like, what does that mean? Exactly. And so I think that's like super important that you talk about. So I don't know if you want to add to that about.
I do actually. You just made me think of something, because I've been asked recently, like, what is it that sets Love Your Labor apart from other programs out there? Because there are other natural labor prep programs as well. And my answer was that, like, I think all good labor prep programs need to teach you about birth physiology and what your birth choices are, and how to be properly supported, and how to cope with pain. I think that's pretty foundational stuff. But I think what Love Your Labor does is it goes one tier above that, because all that's great, but none of that matters if you're falling into the labor funnel, if you're tripping into the funnel through these obstacles way before you're ever in labor, right? So it's like, we actually need to do that protecting that I was talking about. And that's really where I think my program shines, and some people might be like, well, it's scary, like the things that you talk about, but I'm like, well, it's scarier to go into your very vulnerable birth without knowing it. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of hard truth. It's a little tough love, but my clients are the kind of people who need that, right? And it's like, that's really where the priority is for me, because I feel like we said, the divine birth blueprint, your body knows what to do. So a lot of that education and stuff is important, but not entirely necessary. We think of our ancestors, right? They didn't have all of the details of everything that was happening. They were just really well supported and not afraid. So it's like, I think more than anything, we need to protect birth from the funnel, from the birth matrix, And then all the rest of that foundational learning can really flourish and come into play. But it doesn't even matter if we're getting a scheduled C-section for one of these, because your doctor says your pelvis is too small. It's like, what?
Yeah, that's not a thing.
Yeah, not a thing. So
No.
it's like people need to know that that's not a thing, or else they're going to be totally robbed of their birth experience. And none of the normal labor prep stuff would even come into play. So
No, you're so right. Like, it's so important to protect that space before even in labor, because it so easily get derailed during pregnancy with, a false positive or false reading on an ultrasound. Even, adding that fear in of what that could be, learning, that sometimes I recently learned, like, a placenta previa, if that's detected at like 20 weeks, that should never be really like mentioned, because your uterus is growing and it's going to shift, and your placenta is actually going to go like up, like it's going to rise up in your uterus. And
I was just talking about that on the Q&A today.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yes. And so, like, that's like how it would be like derailed. Anyway, sorry, I'll let you take over.
That on that call today, she was saying, she was literally what you said. She was 20 weeks, and her doctor's like, yeah, your placenta's covering your cervix. And as we probed a little more, it was like, well, it's not covering it, it's just near it. But they were already saying, oh, we might need to do a C-section. I'm like, hold the phone. You're 20 weeks. It's not even covering the cervix, and your uterus. Well, as your baby grows, your placenta is going to move up along with your uterus away from your cervix. So, like, let's just stop. Like, oh my God, she was so concerned. She was so worried, and it's just like fear all the time. So I was just happy to be able to put her mind at ease, but it's the culture. It's the culture. Everything is risk and surgery or pharmaceuticals. It's like that's.
Yeah. And fear that, that pregnancy is a medical condition. Instead of something
it needs to
beautiful,
be monitored
natural.
and exactly, like, we just got to watch it all. We got to intervene, and has to follow this timeline. And it's like, actually, none of those are true.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think you got to experience, because I'm just like looking at time, like, from one of the pioneers herself, like, you actually got to visit the farm and meet Ina May. So maybe you can share your whole experience with the farm and meeting her and what that was like.
Oh my gosh. Like, so cool, because I signed up I just wanted to go to the farm. I just wanted like a tour. I thought I was looking for like a day pass, and I look it up online and I'm like, what? I could spend a whole week there. I can learn a midwifery assistant training program. I can be taught by the farm midwives. Like, sign me the frig up. So I signed up thinking that Ina May was one of those midwives. And I found out through correspondence with the facilitator that she's not working at the farm anymore. And I was like devastated, because I knew her through the business of being born. That's where I first found her. And I was like, what? I can't be in like Tennessee at the farm and not even try. So I'm like, could I possibly set up a meeting with Ina May? And they were like, oh, she doesn't really do that. Like, I don't think so. And they were like, we'll ask her. And then I got an email from Ina May, and it's like, yeah, you're going to be in town these days. Here's my address. Here's my phone number. Like, call me when you're here. And I'm like, holy crap. And the whole night before, of course, I couldn't sleep. And it was the final night of my week there that I ended up meeting Ina May. And I went to her house with another girl who drove me there. And I was kind of thinking it was going to be more like interview style, but it became very obvious. Like, we pulled up, she's like eating a poached egg on toast on her rocking chair on her front porch of her beautiful property. I was like, this is not going to be an interview. Like, we are totally chilling. And she's like, actually, I'm about to go weed my vegetable garden. So we're like, we'll help. And we just helped her weed her garden for an hour while we talked about natural birth, and we talked about our birth experiences. The girl I went with had 5 babies, so
wow,
she had lots to talk about.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, like, just to meet an icon like that. But it was a very short visit. It was like 1 hour. I spent the entire rest of the week with the farm midwives and at the farm, at the like swimming hole and at their restaurant and at their individual houses. They cooked for us every night. And the group of women that I took this class with, I want to say 30 women or so. Like, it was just the most, I mean, it was obviously fascinating learning all the things. Like, they are so confident in natural birth. There is no doubt in their minds. They've delivered thousands of babies, like you say, Amish, who, like, I don't even think they have electricity in those births. Like, they're just totally as natural and basic, right? It's just, they just trust the process, and their number of like losses, their number of cesareans is like minuscule. So I came home from that experience just so confident in natural birth. I was like, nothing is going to throw me off this like unbreakable belief that our bodies have just got this, and that it's actually the system that's fucking everything up. I love to say that. And so that was actually 2 or 3 months before I got pregnant with my third baby and went on that home birth or bust journey. And so I was really happy to have that experience, to have that, again, that resolve, right? That conviction that this was not going to be taken away from me, that there was nothing to be afraid of, that I knew I really felt so equipped that even if something were to go a little sideways or a yellow flag, that I would be able to know what to do from my learning, right? So I felt so educated, so equipped, so empowered. I was like, bring it, let's go. So it was really amazing. Yeah.
That is so amazing. And then I was thinking, maybe like for those that maybe don't know, maybe you can kind of like share what the farm is.
Yeah, I know that. I forget that some people don't know
No,
what
it's
the farm
okay.
is.
Yeah.
So it was like back in the 70s, it was like a hippie commune, basically, where her husband, whose name
Stephen.
I was like, Stephen Gadskin. That's it. We went to his, oh my gosh, when someone dies and you go to their,
like the
tomb? Like headstone,
like tombstone,
or
the headstone.
Yeah. We went to like where he died and stuff. Yeah. So Stephen Gadskin was like a spiritual teacher, basically, and he would do these classes, and he was getting more and more popular, and he started traveling around the country on school buses, and it became this massive line of school buses that all these hippies were traveling all around to hear him speak. And it was all of those hippies who then decided, like, society was not going in the direction that they wanted it to go. They were like, let's just create our own thing. So they pooled their money, they got a huge plot of land, and they really made it work. Like, some people did the food, some people did the medicine, some people did the childcare, some people did the cooking and the growing and the harvesting. Like, it was amazing the way they dispersed all the tasks, and to hear about just how successful this community was. They've got their little houses, and they've got everything that they need. And it was all just built basically to live the way that they wanted to live. But the reason that it became famous for birth is because these were all young, childbearing age people. And they were making babies and having families, and they were on this self-sustaining commune, and they were having to deliver their babies. Ina May was like the one who had the most experience, and then she had other friends kind of come on and train them a little bit more. And they told the story about how in the local town there is an obstetrician, or I guess he's probably just a GP, but the one who delivers babies. And he was so busy already with the Amish community, and he's like, now you guys are here too. He's like, okay. So he taught Ina May and some of the farm midwives, like, some of the basics, like, here's some supplies that you'll need. Here's a little bit of technique that you might need, but like, otherwise just kind of support her and make sure that she's nourished and hydrated, and like, and that's how it was. It was like every birth was like, dim. It was like she was brought all the things that she needed. Her partner was right there with her. No one was poking her, prodding her, pressuring her, like rushing her, like none of that was happening. And their birth rates were, I think their C-section rate was like 1.7%, right? And the WHO recommends 15, but in reality it's like 30. So it's like 1.7 is unbelievably low. And that's really like a nod to our blueprint, our birth blueprint. It's like, this is what the body can do when we support that birth physiology.
It's pretty amazing. Like when I, learned about the farm and what they were doing, and their birth rates and everything are just incredible. And I feel like it's such an amazing case study that it's like, how are we not paying more attention to these numbers of what they experienced and what they created and what they did? And you realize it's like, because they don't want to. They want to be stuck in interventions and the money and everything else. And it's crazy, but I think it's so beautiful. And when I love Ina May's stories, because like what you would be experiencing with your calls, like hearing stories is just so empowering and important to share. And I love, like, because, it was like you said, it was a bunch of, they say, hippies that were there and in the 70s. So it was a lot of, psychedelic and groovy, and I was so high on this experience. And but what I really kind of took away I found interesting was the intimacy of the couples, and being alone in their experience, what they did. And they use they refer to it a lot as smooching. They did a lot of smooching like during their labor. I just loved that. I just thought it was funny to call it, like, kissing. Yeah, we smooched a lot, but but I thought that was so interesting, because you think of, like, a hospital birth, and they're just so intrusive. There's not any moment to feel alone or intimate with your partner, or just even being alone in your own space. But with a lot of the births on the farms, the stories, the partners were very connected with in the process.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was very interesting, to how far removed we are now with even our partners, like at births. They're just, at the head, if you're in the hospital, at the head of the bed, and everything else is happening down below with all these other people.
Yeah, totally. I know Ina May talks about how, like, a woman in labor should sound like a woman who's having really good sex. And like the line between labor and lovemaking is very thin, right? Like all the same hormones, all the same parts, the exact same purpose. So it's like the same hormones, like all the things are aligned, and it makes sense that intimacy during the labor process would just help to propel that along. And that's one of the big reasons that the second module of the Love Your Labor program is the partner prep, because it's like, not only is your partner most likely going to be attending your birth, but also they're the one that you already love and feel most comfortable and connected and close with. And that hormone is going to benefit you. It's just going to augment your labor naturally. We don't need Pitocin. We just need some smooching.
Some smooching. Yes, exactly. And it's like, as a term, it was like, how the baby got in there is how the baby's going to get out. Yes. And next week, I'm gonna put your book up again as well. But next week, I'm bringing on, I believe, Sheila Stubbs. So she wrote "Birthing the Easy Way." And this
that was
a really
game changer.
This is an excellent book, and it's amazing. She references, in some of her last chapters are the X-Files, and it kind of talks about what we're, just touching on now. And it's interesting because talks about how the birth process is like the completion of the sexual experience with like your partner. So it's like, okay, you are intimate, you have sex and you conceived, and then the birth with your partner being involved, it's like that whole completion of the experience, and the partner's involved in that, and being like, okay, and that was, like his seed that was like planted. Anyways, it explained way better. So I'm excited for Sheila to come on and kind of like wrap that up and explain, because I think it's kind of interesting. And we were talking about mainstream media, how in movies and everything, it just shows like, you know, everything being terrifying, rushing down like the hospital hallways in a wheelchair, screaming, and like, like all the scenes. And so I will admit that I had watched Outlander, and I do enjoy it. So a little guilty pleasure of mine, but
I didn't know that one.
Anyways, one of the scenes, it's taking place in the 1700s, and I was shocked they included this scene in here, and I'm like meaning to record it and put it up because it was a French husband with his Scottish wife, and she was having a hard time with her labor. He was not present at the time, and then finally made it. And he started explaining how nipple stimulation helps open things up and helps the process. And so because he used to, as a kid, work in brothels, and he's like, this is what all the women did. So anyways, I thought it was interesting for, you know, a show in our time that they actually explained this, and whatever, they did their thing. But yeah, he totally like showed and he did like, you know, some manual and nipple stimulation, and next thing you know, she's having her baby. But I was like, I can't believe that was like included to show that and actually explain it.
Yes, I would be equally as shocked, because I would say across the board, it's well, I guess maybe back then it couldn't have been super medical, but anything you see that's relatively modern, right, would be. And yeah, I agree. That's because that is a good way to help move things along. So it's like, well, thanks for the tip.
I know. Because, you know, another erogenous zone, like we were saying, how baby gets in is how baby gets out. You want to release those, you know, the oxytocin and all those other hormones. But
because oxytocin is your orgasm hormone. So think of anything that's going to build that, right, is going to also propel your labor. So it's so brilliant. I mean, Mother Nature is so friggin' brilliant. It's humbling.
It really is. Like, we were not created by mistake. There is a complete divine design to our beings, and nothing is by mistake. And it's all incredibly beautiful, which I am so, you know, excited that these conversations are happening, that Children's Health Defense is having this conversation on their platforms, because so we can get back to, you know, taking back birth, to having to being the badass birth goddess, and just really just embracing how beautiful it is.
Right. Because if we needed all this medical intervention, we wouldn't have gotten this far.
No.
Like,
never.
What would our cave ancestors have done? Yes. Right. So it's like, no, it's totally possible. We just need to protect it.
And you can do that by, you know, getting Corinne's book. So The Badass Birth Goddess, it's an excellent read. I was like very impressed with how beautiful it was. So it's a really excellent, there's pictures in there, and it's very well done. So this is an excellent book you can get. And then I'll let you take it away of how people can find you, look in your programs and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram is probably the main place that I hang out. And so my handle there is brownroots.love. You can also find me on Instagram at love.your.labor. I think I might change that handle eventually because it's a little cumbersome to say. But yeah, so those are my handles. And then all the links, if you wanted to read more about Love Your Labor, or you wanted to sign up for a free call and see if it might be a good fit, all those links are in my bio. You can visit my website, brownrootslove.com, and the links will all be there, as well as my podcast, which is Rebirth with Corrine Brown. That's also on my website, and on Spotify and Apple and all the podcast platforms. And Kristen was my recent guest, so you'll definitely want to listen to that. And other than that, just reach out in any or all ways. I'm also on Facebook, mostly just for my Love Your Labor group, though. I'm not very active on Facebook. So, yeah.
And I mentioned before, but I'm going to keep putting plugs in to save the date, because I think we're looking at June 10th now for the Redefine Your Birth conference in London, Ontario. And I'm working on getting Corinne to come down, see if we can make that happen.
I'm just like confirming it with all my childcare people here. I'm like, are we good if I go? Yes. Because I just got home and I'm like, asking to leave again, but
oh, because you were like just in Toronto too.
Yeah.
Yes,
but that's
so
okay. Yeah,
I'm trying to have her back in June, so she can come to London and share all this amazing knowledge in person. And you can listen to her speak. So
that'd be amazing.
That. Yeah, it's going to be fabulous. I can't wait. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to end on.
No, I think that's it. Just thank you so much for asking me, and thank you, Children's Health Defense of Canada, for putting this on. Because, like we said, like in my episode, it's just like, we just got to get this message out there. Like any and everyone who knows the truth just has to speak it, because women are pregnant for such a short amount of time, and so many of them, right? That it's like we all need to work together to just shape and change women's experiences, right? Because if they don't know, then they can't avoid it.
Exactly. Just more wise women helping women.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and tune back in next week, next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And like I said, we're bringing on, I believe Sheila Stubbs is coming on next week. So that's going to be a great conversation.
Love Sheila.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much again.
Thanks, Kristen.
And see you guys all later. Have a great night.
Bye.